Welcome to Stuff You Missed in History Class, a production of iHeartRadio. Hello and happy Friday. I'm Holly Fry.
And I'm Tracy V. Wilson.
Oh, what a mess of a marathon we talked about this week.
We did.
First, I want to talk about a couple of things related specifically to this, and then I'll go on my tirade, or they'll get intertwined. I don't know. One of the things that made me infuriated, and obviously, I would say that those athletes were fully abused, no qualifier at all.
I agree.
They were abused by race organizers. It would have sucked and been really bad if they were just really bad at planning, and that's why things went so poorly. But because they purposefully treated them like lab experiments and almost killed two of them, I have no sympathy for them.
Yeah, it's very bad.
Charles Lucas in his book that's a fascinating and, like I said, gross and racist at points read. But what's really interesting is that he both praises Hicks for his, incredible drive to finish the race and says really insulting things about him. And he's kind of that way with a lot of them. But at one point, there's one quote where he's talking about Hicks towards the end, and he said, his mind continually roved towards something to eat. And in the last mile, Hicks continually harped on the subject. And I'm like, I hate you, Charles Lucas.
Because he was hungry,
dehydrated and hungry and possibly dying from the strychnine you gave him.
Right.
So much anger. That entire read is, again, fascinating because it is an insight into how race organizers and the Olympic Committee perceived what they were doing.
Mm-hmm.
And horrifying because it is super racist and also treats all of the runners like lab rats.
Yeah.
And not human beings. But to make it a little bit funnier, I wanted to talk again about Felix Carvajal, because I think, here is why I believe the Apple story. So after he went to the 1904 games, and even though he didn't medal, he was considered to have really been a pretty good representative for Cuba and Cuban athletics. So when the 1906 games happened in Athens, they actually sent him there. He didn't have to do the whole, I just want to go on this trip by myself. They actually fundraised, but he did go by himself again. And he didn't make it to the games, but we don't know why, because after he got to Italy, he disappeared.
Well, okay.
And nobody knew his whereabouts, and there was no sign of him, and so he was presumed dead.
Wow.
Newspapers in Cuba ran his obituary, but then he just showed up in Havana one day on a steamer from Spain with a Spanish flag. And he didn't ever really, to the best of my knowledge, explain where he had been, but it seemed like he had a fun time in Europe and then came home.
So funny.
So I 100% believe that he ate some apples, didn't feel good, took a quick nap.
Yeah.
He seems like a very fun guy. Little focus issues. One of the things that is cool, I don't know if that's the right thing, helpful about this particular race is that there is visual documentation of it. There are photographs of those runners. There, we see a lot of the things that we talked about are photographed, and some of it is hard to look at because you see how Hicks is not there. He looks like he is comatose as he's, kind of being pushed along essentially. But it is cute, and you do get to see Carvajal in his cute little dandy outfit. And listen, this is where we talk about, you and I have both run distance races. We're not big competitors, but I've done a marathon.
Run is generous.
Right.
For what I did. I completed a half marathon.
Right. Same. I'm a run walk interval gal, or I was when I was running regularly. 2 water stops is often what you would get in a 5K.
Yeah. So, this made me particularly mad in this moment that we're living in, because we've had so much here in the U.S., and I'm sure I can't speak for the rest of the world. I am not up to the minute on other nations' weather, but here in the U.S., we have had a whole lot of record-breaking heat this summer, and a movement for federal safety standards for worker safety during heat that includes things like water. And I think as our climate has gotten warmer, more people have become aware of how dangerous heat and humidity can be, especially if you don't have a way to cool off, a way to get in the shade, ample water. And so this, like, just the whole idea of we're going to start a race when it's already 90 degrees and humid and not give we're not going to give people hardly any water. And we're going to do that on purpose. It just made me really angry.
And then we're going to poison some of them.
Yeah.
Because Lucas was involved in that decision to give Hicks strychnine. So that came from, like, one of the organizers.
Right.
What the actual bleep?
Right.
Like, I can't. What? This also is interesting because that gets referenced as the first known instance of doping in modern sports.
Mm-hmm.
Which is like I have like the quizzical puppy question mark face, because I'm like, well, doping / poisoning someone. But, Hicks is very lucky he didn't die. Those organizers are very lucky that he didn't die and that Garcia didn't die on the course.
Right. I also feel like there is a difference between when someone becomes injured or in some other way is struggling during an event and another competitor, like in a display of sporting behavior, helps them and they finish together, right? I feel like there's a difference between that and staff people literally carrying a competitor who honestly should be in the hospital.
100%. And like, this is also a good, I don't know if it's a good example, but it's a good contrast to see how things like regulation in sport are vital.
Mm-hmm.
And to see just how far we've come, right? The thought of somebody going, okay, you have the Olympics, and then like, go with God, make that thing happen, would never happen today. There are so many regulations, rules, checklists, guidelines. And I mean, everything has to start somewhere. But this is kind of like the good cautionary tale of like, I know sometimes rules can become convoluted and probably frustrating for people trying to organize things, but also no rules leads to this. Oof. I literally think about, I have done one marathon. I hated it. You were there that day. Thank goodness. Like I mean, I'm glad I did it. I can say like, oh, I did a marathon. I have friends that do them regularly and love them. And like, but I just, no, thank you. I don't want to do that again. And I cannot, and I had like all of the benefits, right? Like I did the Disney World Marathon, which is like support. They have, nurses stations. They have all of the water stops. They have things to entertain you and keep you occupied. They have all of the help you could possibly need. And I still found it miserable and difficult. And I was running in, modern, very engineered running clothes.
Right. And also in, moderate cool temperatures on a pretty flat course. because you're in Orlando.
Yeah. Yeah, and they start the races at like ungodly hours of the morning.
So early. I feel like we got up at 3 a.m. or something. I don't remember. We got up really early. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I have run. I think the hottest I have ever been in a race wasn't a race in Orlando. It was only a 10K. And I remember at the end of that feeling like, ooh, that was dangerous toward the end. And again, same. I had all of the support on Earth. There was water. There was food waiting for me at the end. There were, So my hat is off to anyone who even got past the mile marker on this one. But also, like, that's all very wrong, and I wish they did not do it. But
Right. Yeah. I've only done the one half marathon, which I kind of did on a whim. And occasionally I will think, should I do that again? And I enjoyed having done it. But like the process of training, the training that I did was like not something that I enjoyed. I would say the race itself, that was fine. But like the process of feeling confident that I would finish it and I would not have to be picked up in a golf cart and transported somewhere. Like the process of getting physically to that point was just a lot. And I try to exercise regularly because my mental and physical health feel better when I do that. But like what I had to dedicate myself to do that half marathon was not the same.
Oh yeah, the training was the worst part, right? Like, because I was doing the stupid. Listen, it's not stupid if you're doing it. It was stupid for me. I shouldn't probably have done it. I was doing the goofy where you do the half on Saturday and the full on Sunday, and so to train, like in the months leading up to it, I was just like, I don't have a social life anymore. I have no balance to my life because I'm either working or running. That's stopped being fun.
Yeah. We also did a 5K before all of that.
I did. And there are people now that do the 5K. They have since added a 10K to that race weekend, and then the half, and then the full. And again, my hat is off to you. Some of those people are amazingly conditioned, but for me, have I ever told you about the hilarious things that I have encountered specifically during the Space Coast half marathon?
I don't think so.
So, one, the brandy thing reminded me, this was not at Space Coast. This was a Disney thing. There was a woman who finished several races, several half marathons, pretty close to a similar time to me because I saw this happen at least 3 times. And it was the same woman because, there are people who love Disney races and they'll do all of them.
Mm-hmm.
And she always had pretty close to the finish line, like, just a little ways up from it, friends that were there with a pitcher and they would pour her a margarita and she would finish the race holding a margarita.
Okay.
Which I always thought was really funny and great.
Uh-huh.
But on the Space Coast half marathon, which starts in Cocoa Beach and it goes up and down the coast there, and it's absolutely beautiful and it's a really fun one, and you get very cool space themed medals because it's right there by the Kennedy Space Center. You're running through neighborhoods.
Mm-hmm.
And there is one family who I do not know their names, but I wish all of the blessings of life upon them, who basically set up their own unofficial aid station.
Mm-hmm.
And when I tell you it's an aid station, what it really is an amazing party on their lawn. Like they have things you would want, like water, sports drink, etc. But they also are out there with full chafing dishes full of like bacon.
Oh, wow.
Other light sandwiches if you don't want to do something foolish and eat bacon.
Yeah, I was going to say
for some people, but I ate the bacon every time and I was
the
fine.
idea of eating bacon in the middle of that immediately turned my stomach.
I don't remember if it was at their house or another one nearby that they had somebody out there with essentially like a bar outpost where they would pour you a drink if you wanted. And for people like me that were not like, I gotta run this thing for a time, I'm going, like, that one is I will say, before you think like nobody should have bacon on a course, that particular race, because the half marathon you have the same allowance of time that the full marathon has, because it's the way the course is laid out, the marathon is running part of the half marathon course, so like they don't close it. And there are people that walk the whole thing, and it's a pretty casual, like, I'm just going to have a long morning of walking around the beach, enjoying the beautiful weather and smiling and waving at people, and I'm going to get my big, space shuttle medal at the end. And so for those people, and often by the end, because it's an out and back course, you would pass that house twice.
Oh.
So I wouldn't always take bacon on the way out, but on the way back, when I'm like, I got 2 miles left, I'm just going to walk it and eat bacon. That sounds great. I'll take a cocktail. That sounds amazing. I have had some amazing experiences running half marathons.
Yeah.
And I really enjoyed them when I was doing them all the time, but now I just feel like it's too much effort and my body doesn't want to do that anymore.
Yeah, I am in the one half marathon that I did. I injured my foot and had to see a podiatrist afterward.
I remember. But if you do such things, please take care of your body. Don't do foolishness. Don't do it. It's I think about this and I wonder if, years down the road, Hicks was like, yeah, that was worth it. I don't think he ran again. I didn't pursue it, but I saw one write-up that said that was his last race. And I'm like, yeah, it would be mine too. I got poisoned.
Yeah.
So in any case, if you do distance running, 1, I cheer you. 2, take care of yourself out there, especially in very hot weather. It's rough. You got to be really looking out for your hydration and your health.
We talked about Emily Sargent and Judith Sargent Murray this week on the podcast, which was a great excuse for me to take a little field trip out to Gloucester. I love Cape Ann. I've been out to Cape Ann a few times. I find the whole area very beautiful. And I went on the Friday before July 4th because that day we had as a half day. And I was like, I have things I want to do in Gloucester, being going to these museums for work. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to Gloucester, go to these museums, and then my half day will begin and I will already be in Gloucester and I can walk around and look at the water. And that is exactly what I did. One amusing thing that happened, the Sargent House Historical Home Museum, it is largely focused on Judith Sargent Murray, but there are also other families that owned the home after she lived there, and there's some reference to them also. And so there are guided tours of the house that leave on the hour, and I was there for the first one of the day, and so it was just me and these 2 other women and a docent. And it was also pretty early in their season. It's a museum that's only open in the summer because it does not, it's not like climate controlled for winters in Massachusetts. And so we got near the end of this tour, and one of the other people who was on it asked our tour guide, how many men come on this tour? And she just kind of paused and went, almost always only with a woman, which I found to be funny. One of the things that they have on display in this museum are some childhood drawings done by John Singer Sargent. And they 100% look like something a child could have drawn with a pencil today. There's one that I think is supposed to be his father, that if you look at it, maybe his father's like at a writing desk, or maybe it's supposed to be a book. But I was like, this looks like a 6-year-old drew it yesterday, and that's their dad on a laptop, which I found pretty great. Something about Judith Sargent Murray that I could not find a place to fit in the episode, but wanted to mention, is that she actually agreed with Noah Webster that there should be an American language and an American dictionary. I don't know if she went quite as far as the spelling reforms that he proposed, but she was very on board with the idea of like, we need an American way of speaking and writing.
Yeah. To which I go, okay.
Yeah.
I have such conflicted, weird feelings about that.
About the language part?
Well, just about like the idea of rejecting things that have gone before in favor of establishing a new identity. I understand that completely.
Mm-hmm.
But it's also kind of like, it makes me think of the French Republican calendar, where it's like, you don't have to disrupt everybody's everything to prove that you are your own unique identity. Like, it's okay. People were already functioning. It's fine. I would vote in lieu of, we need to make a new American English dictionary saying we are going to be less fussy about all the rules as long as everybody understands each other.
That'd be cool, yeah.
That should be the identity.
Yeah.
Everybody be cool. That's always my bottom line. Like, that should be the driving decider. There are reasons I don't hold positions of power or government.
Yeah. One thing that I noticed as I was researching Judith Sargent Murray specifically was kind of a weird debunking tone in some recently written work about her. And the reason it was weird to me was that it was sort of judging how feminist she was.
Huh.
And I kind of feel like she was one of the first, if not the first, women writing, people of European descent writing in North America specifically about women's rights. Like, one of the first people to do that. And it's true. She wrote a lot of other stuff on a lot of other subjects, a lot on universalism, a lot on how she thought the country should operate, like a lot that wasn't about women's rights. And her views on women's rights, like, definitely reflect the time she was living in and her upbringing and, like, existing thought on the roles of women. Like, that's true of everyone. And so I felt like the things that have not been discussed as much about her, like, there hasn't been as much discussion of, like, how really focused she was on other women like herself and sort of not even really observing women of other classes or other races. Like, I think that's an important thing to note. Also really important to note how slavery was connected to all of this, because that is not mentioned at all in a lot of writing about her. And I had to do a lot of digging to talk about that. But, like, there was just this sense that what people were focused on was, like, a yardstick of how feminist she was. And I was like, this is weird to me, because anytime anytime we're using the word feminist to describe a woman who was living before that term was really coined and used in the way we use it now, like, it's always not going to compare to later thought about gender and sex.
Right.
And I found it odd. I was like, I feel like there's a weird debunkery happening, but that it's focused in an odd direction.
I mean, I haven't read these things, so I am talking strictly from your descriptor, but I think what often happens, right, is those sorts of comparisons of, like, saying, well, she wasn't really X amount feminist. It's almost the same as things going, like, from any direction, is that I understand the desire to boil everything down to, like, kind of, simple identifiers to parse the world that we live in. But that robs all of it of its nuance a little bit, which is worthy of consideration and is part of looking at a human's life as a whole.
Yeah.
It's a tricky balance. Like I said, I understand the impulse to kind of do the checklist, but I also recognize that is not going to give you a true representation of the thing that you're measuring.
Yeah. There was kind of a vibe of, like, people keep calling her a feminist, but she thought that women should be mothers. And I'm like, so did a lot of early suffragists. Like, why is this what we're pointing out? The one other thing that I wanted to note is I think there may be folks who are thinking about Emily Sargent, and the fact that Emily Sargent never married or had children and was lifelong friends with Vernon Lee, also known as Violet Paget. And Vernon Lee, as we know, had a number of like long-term committed relationships with other women. So I feel like a logical, reasonable question is, do we know anything about like Emily Sargent's sexual orientation or romantic life? I have no idea. I found no reference to any of that in any work about her. There's a lot more writing about John Singer Sargent, and the episode was not about him, and so I did not even really try to get into that at all.
Right. At that point, everything is conjecture.
Yeah, if people are curious about Emily, I honestly don't know. Don't know at all. So I am still very captivated by her life story, and hope that one day, as there's more interest in her, as more museums have more of her work, and there will be more of it on display, that I hope there will be more research into her life, and maybe a full biography of her own one day.
Fingers crossed.
Yeah. So, happy Friday, whatever's happening this weekend for you. I hope it's as great as possible. If you want to drop us a note about anything, we're at historypodcast@iHeartRadio.com. We will be back with a Saturday classic tomorrow and something brand new on Monday. Stuff You Missed in History Class is a production of iHeartRadio. For more podcasts from iHeartRadio, visit the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you listen to your favorite shows.